Hello, today is Wednesday, June 18th. Welcome to episode 466 of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI's Deputy Executive Director, Martha Miller, and I'm joined today by Advisory Board Member Lester Munson and NSI's Senior Fellow Morgan Benia. The Israel-Iran conflict is now in the 6th day, and it's unfolding with historic consequences. The immediate catalyst of this was the June 12th censure of Iran by the IAEA for noncompliance with nuclear safeguards. This is the first such rebuke since 2005. Within hours, Israel launched a sweeping offensive, citing the IAEA's findings as evidence of an urgent nuclear threat. But this action was also the culmination of months of escalating attacks by Iran and its proxies, and really years of that. Iran had launched waves of ballistic missiles and drones at Israeli cities, while groups like Hezbollah, Iraqi militias, and Houthis intensifying their own strikes. Since June 12th, Israel has struck over 1,100 targets in Iran, including missile bases, drone facilities, and nuclear sites. The Natanz enrichment plant and centrifuge factories in Tehran and Karaj have been hit hard, with the IAEA confirming major disruptions to Iran's enrichment capability. Iran has fired more than 400 ballistic missiles at Israel, though the pace is dropping, largely because Iran only has but so many ballistic missiles. Meanwhile, President Trump has ordered a major U.S. military buildup with multiple carrier strike groups and advanced aircraft now deployed to the region. He has demanded unconditional surrender from Tehran and warned civilians to evacuate, while Iran's leadership has vowed not to back down and threatens severe consequences if the U.S. intervenes. All right, team. Morgan, let's start with you. Will the United States demonstrate resolve to defend our interests? To what extent do you think Donald Trump will defend Israel or just take action in this situation, offensive action?
Thanks, Martha. So on Monday, I was a little concerned, I'll admit, about the administration's lackluster response to defending Israel. I mean, Rubio's statement in particular was concerning. And I think that we've really seen this administration show a lot of support and frankly, backbone to the Iranian regime, which is a very different take than what we saw in the previous administration. So right now I'm liking what I'm seeing. Do I think that the administration will take military action against Iran? It's looking likely, right? But I think the big question is what does that actually look like, right? We're sending KC-46s, aerial refueling tankers, to the region. B-52s from Diego Garcia are supposedly getting ready or put on standby. Of course, the B-52s are the bunker busters, which are needed in order to go after deep underground nuclear installations like Fordo. Fordo in particular, I would say, is my main concern right now because we haven't actually heard a lot of it. We've heard about Natanz getting hit. Fordo is a little bit more difficult for the Israelis. It's not to say that they don't it's not to say that they don't have the capabilities. I mean, who knows what kind of assets they have, on the ground. But when it comes to actually demolishing Fordo, I think they will probably need some help from the United States in that respect. I don't expect the United States to go have troops on the ground. I think anyone who suggests that is completely out of sorts. They have not really evolved with modern warfare, so to speak. So I think we're looking at a very different situation than what we had, let's say, with Iraq or Afghanistan, for that matter. I will note that I think it's quite possible that U.S. engagement in Iran could be limited just because the United States sends military support and goes after, let's say, hypothetically, goes after Fordo. It's not to say that we will have a sustained presence there. I mean, look, in the first Trump administration, we bombed Syria after Assad used a chemical weapons attack, and we didn't really take any additional further action there. So I think what the parameters of U.S. engagement are to be determined. I'm sure that's being sorted out now.
Well, and I think there's also a question as to whether or not these bunker buster bombs can actually reach the depth of 300 feet Fordo has, right? It's I think they go to a depth of 200, but obviously that'll be something that it'll be part of the calculation, right? But it's certainly the best chance possible, and certainly easier than some sort of ground based demolishing of Fordo. Lester, I think, I would like to hear your thoughts about whether or not this is an America First MAGA policy. Has, the Trump administration has, there have been critics within the MAGA movement, about, our potential involvement or escalation. Do you think this fits with, the kind of foreign policy that Trump campaigned on? Has he been evolving in his thinking and approach to foreign policy?
No, he has not been evolving. Um, so if you go back 10 years to when Donald Trump first kind of directly entered American politics and announced he was running for president, in that speech, he talked about Obama's very bad nuclear deal and said Iran cannot be allowed to get a nuclear weapon. So this goes back a long way. Yes, the president has an interesting coalition behind him, but I just want to say, and we kind of addressed some of that 2 days ago when we were talking about the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, and some of the stuff that's going on with her recently. But for the folks who are part of the coalition who think that a strike on Iran is somehow out of bounds, are not really paying attention. They missed that in the first speech. I don't think they really understand the politics that are so appealing for many people with President Trump, which is not isolationism. It is not kind of the globalism or the internationalist approach of a George W. Bush or George H.W. Bush at all, but it's kind of like Reagan during the campaign in 1979 and 1980. It is for a muscular U.S. response when the U.S. is directly threatened. Iran has directly threatened Americans. It held Americans hostage 46 years ago. People have not forgotten that. I have not forgotten that. I'm old enough. Some of you people on this podcast are not old enough to remember that. But the American people are mad at the Iranian government for those sins against the United States. President Trump knows this. He was a fully grown adult during that hostage crisis in 1979. He saw what happened. He saw how Iran tried to humiliate the United States. This has been a long time coming. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to strike. He did say that Iran should unconditionally surrender. That it's hard to walk back from that. Now, you can't really box in Trump on anything because one of his main features is his total flexibility at all times on any kind of approach. But it's hard to walk back from unconditional surrender. So it sure seems to me like the U.S. is going to participate in an attack here. I think it's going to be about Fordo and maybe other locations, and it may be these non-nuclear bunker busters, these 30,000-pound bombs. It may be something else. There's other capabilities the U.S. has that are not on the front page. Could there be something else going on here? Perhaps. But it sure seems like he's walked right to the edge of U.S. involvement here. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this goes. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be clean and a one-off and a no-brainer here. There could be real consequences for the U.S. national security. We have a lot of assets in the Middle East. We have a lot of soft targets here in our country. We're going to have to be very realistic about the consequences of getting involved in this war if we do. It's not going to be as easy as a lot of people think, but it sure seems like President Trump is committed to this. I don't want to say that 100%, more like 99.8%.
So I've seen some memes going around with a picture, like a cartoon of Trump looking at a sign where you have Iraq crossed out and Iran is written below it. I'm just curious because, thus far the Israelis have managed to take out numerous people among the Iranian leadership. They have also conveyed to the people who are replacing those individuals that they will be next. So it's hard for me not to imagine a situation where there's, if not regime change, an upending of the current regime. So I'm just curious to get your guys' thoughts. Like, first of all, like we don't I don't think there's anybody to replace the current regime. So it seems like that would end up in chaos. But it's hard to imagine that this will not end up in some kind of chaos.
Well, two quick thoughts, Martha. One, I think we actually would have been involved in this a lot earlier, but for the invasion of Iraq in 2003, which arguably did not go as well as it could have gone. I'll just leave it at that. But that the consequences of the U.S. getting involved in Iraq meant that we weren't going to get involved in Iran in 2007 when we realized they had a very well developed nuclear weapons program. That's point number one. Number two, this is not Iraq. That we're not talking about U.S. troops on the ground. This would be a more surgical strike. That does not mean there won't be consequences for the U.S. As we were kind of talking about earlier. This is not going to be easy. War never is. There are always consequences that we can't anticipate. So we should all be, fairly level-headed about the prospects here. This could be there could be a lot of difficulties ahead. I think it's inevitable that there's regime change in Iran. The leadership there is not sustainable now. They're completely tied to a nuclear weapons program. If that's eliminated, effectively, they're eliminated. There's no reason to have them around anymore. The alternative could be it could be the Ayatollah's son. It could be someone else in the family. It could be someone in the military. It could be another kind of political leader who's nearby. The U.S. isn't going to go in and install anyone, but I think in Iran, there will be a real internal pressure to have very different leadership going forward.
Les, one person and one group that you didn't mention was the Iranian opposition. I mean, it's not just this, not just the Ayatollahs, right? Iran has a very robust diaspora community. Reza Pahlavi, the former Shah's son, has been very out front and vocal on this. You've got organizations here in the United States like Nufti that have been talking about regime change now for years. And I think this is a good sign that you do have a thriving opposition. At the same time, though, they are outside of the United States. They are not super well organized. And I am concerned, quite frankly, about what a new government in Iran would look like. I would love to see Iran be, free and democratic and liberated from this current regime. There are many Iranians within the country that want this. What that looks like, though, I think is very uncertain right now, and it's something that we need to play a very, very big role in because it's one thing, as we learned from Iraq, to get rid of the bad guys, but who do you replace them with, and how do you make that relationship sustainable for the long term?
Yeah, I agree, Morgan. I think the lesson from Iraq is having, you have to have a plan for the aftermath. So, that is definitely the biggest unknown, and probably, something that, something we have to be watching. But I have to say, look, we've been talking on this podcast about Afghanistan and the debacle in 2021 for, as, frankly, evidence, kind of almost an invitation to aggression. So, look, I think Trump's going to have to live up to this demand for unconditional surrender. This is about reestablishing American deterrence. If America stands by while Israel absorbs the costs and risks of degrading Iran's nuclear threat, the message to Beijing and Moscow, will be clear, right? So our commitments have to, we have to be decisive. We have to have credible threat. And, we are in a world that, that needs American resolve. So let's hope that this situation reestablishes American deterrence because it only works when it's believed. On that note, that's a wrap. Thank you so much to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for the help producing today's episode. Join us on Friday, June 20th for another episode. And fault lines we're on YouTube, so check us out. And if you like what you've heard or saw, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.